Welcome to the KBA Vendor Viewpoint podcast, where we bring together Kentucky bankers and the industry's top vendor solutions to discuss important topics that affect your bank. Here's your host, KBA Director of Membership, Products, and Services, Selina Parrish.
Today, we are featuring KBA Endorsed ImageQuest and discussing the hot topic of AI. With me today is Milton Bartley, co-founder and CEO of ImageQuest, and Jennifer Donahue, Senior Strategic Account Executive. Thank you for being with us today. Milton and Jennifer, please tell our audience how ImageQuest is assisting KBA members with strategically using AI.
Well, good morning, Selina, and thank you for having us here today. As you said, I'm Milton Bartley, and this is Jennifer Donahue, and we're going to have a little bit of a back and forth conversation this morning, and we're going to talk about how we're serving our Kentucky banks with artificial intelligence, kind of guidance, some tooling in some cases, and being good thought partners for them in other cases. So let me just get started. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and ask Jennifer a question because she deals with these folks all the time. So Jennifer, what are the most common questions you hear from a bank or any organization leadership when AI starts to come up in conversation?
Absolutely. So it really depends on who I'm speaking with within the organization. So I have a lot of conversations with IT directors, CISOs, CTOs, because they've been tasked by leadership to deploy this, choose a tool and deploy it across the organization. So of course, the very first thing that they bring up is security. We love AI, we love the capabilities of it, but how, as a regulated entity, do I deploy it safely across the organization?
Yeah, I can see that. So when I have conversations, it's a lot of the same, or when I get a phone call, it's not always from the doers, but from the leaders. That's one of their first questions is, are we breaking regulation here? How do we solve this? FDIC is going to ask us this question. How do we answer it? Or the other question I'll get a lot is, what's so-and-so bank doing? What's this other bank doing, right? Yeah. They want that group think.
Exactly.
So what else, from security, move on from that. What are the next things? If we kind of made them feel comfortable that, hey, we can address this in some way, in a safe and secure way, what are they asking next?
The next thing they want to know is, what's the best practices when it comes to deploying it to everybody? Like, where do we start? What tasks are we going to tackle first? Do we tackle the everyday personal productivity tasks with AI, or do we look at the broader business use cases? So they really want to know where to start.
And Jennifer, you hear what I hear. A lot of times it's interchangeable. They talk about ChatGPT, it's almost like Kleenex now, right?
Oh, yes.
So they're talking about ChatGPT when they really are talking about AI. And we have to kind of listen and hear that and filter that out. So how are we able to help a client that doesn't know anything about AI other than, hey, the board told me we have to leverage this in some way? Where do we even start? Where do we start with that conversation?
Absolutely. So, we've helped a lot of banks deploy this across the bank. And the first place that we suggest they start is with their policies and procedures. Like, how does the bank want to use AI within the confines of the company? And secondly, who is going to spearhead this initiative? Like, making sure identifying those people on staff that,
Well, I think you said earlier that IT is where this almost always lands, right? Because it's technology, right? It plugs into the wall. It must be IT's problem to solve. So we usually end up talking to an IT person. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah. So, leadership's very, very excited about this, as they should be. And then, they hand it off to an IT person too. And of course, they're very security minded. So they want to.
Well, what I find when I talk to them a lot of times is they've been told to go do this, but they don't know what this is. And so they're trying to start with the big, oh my gosh, well, what's the biggest thing we could do with AI and make the biggest splash? Let's go figure out how we automate loan processing, right? And so that's the first question is they want to tackle this giant task. And I always feel like we have to say, whoa, let's take it down about 3 notches and let's figure out, where can we do some things inside your bank today that don't touch regulated data? What are some of the choke points or administrative burdensome things that we do inside the bank today that take days, hours, lots of minutes to do, but they never touch regulated data? Let's start there, right? Why don't we start without putting you out in front of a regulator at firing squad?
Yeah, absolutely. So those like going back to the personal productivity, what do I, Jennifer, do on a daily basis that takes a lot of my administrative time is going to be much different than what you, Milton, the CEO of the company, does with your time. And the only way you're going to figure out what those best use cases are to put a tool in the hands of the people so that they can figure out how to best leverage it in what they're doing every day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how do we help a customer think through what tool they even want? So we talked about security being important, but what else is important when we think about selecting a tool?
Of course. So you're going to want to think about what are you going to use it for?
Okay.
Because, they all have different capabilities. You're also going to want to look out, not only what are we going to use it for today, but what are we potentially going to need to use it for in the future? Because you're going to want to start thinking about, as you make these choices, is it something that's going to meet you where you are today? Be kind of the easy button solution for an organization that has people coming with a variety of different levels of understanding of AI, but also grow with you as you go down your AI journey.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I see and hear a lot, and what I then articulate back is, we get asked the big picture question. Our loan department, if we can automate this or that, or, if we can automate something for the tellers on the front line or whatever that may be. And where I end up kind of pushing back and saying, hey, for any of these real bank specific tasks that are going to touch your core data, your PII, your GLBA protected data, we're almost certainly going to rely on the big vendors that you already work with to bring their tool into you, right? We're not going to probably build a process that does something that your core vendor likely should be doing. And so we're going to wait for that core vendor. And I say wait, I don't mean wait 5 years, but we're going to wait for that core vendor or that mortgage loan operating system vendor or whatever that other vendor is to bring that solution to bear for us. That's going to then have guardrails around it. It's going to be tested. Those companies largely go through a regulatory process as well. So where I see banks failing may not be the right word, Jennifer, but where I see banks struggling is they're talking to this new vendor that's this new fintech that doesn't have any banking clients that we can name. And they're trying to convince you to be their guinea pig. They won't use those words, but that's really what it is. So are you running into some of that as well, where you talk to people and they're all excited about some tool and they want us to look at this tool and they don't even know what the tool means yet? And that people can't even spell bank that are bringing this tool to them. They just talk about AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I see two things. So I see that because there is so much hype out in the marketplace and it's easy to get excited about these tools. Right. But then I also see there's a comfort level with, say, like a ChatGPT. And so like going back to your point where it's become the Kleenex of AI, that's what people are comfortable with. So they're looking at the enterprise license where, maybe they're pigeonholed into that and don't even see the possibility of some of these other tools that are out in the market right now. So really making sure they understand what they need it for and then knowing what is available to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can remember this. I'll do an anecdote and then bring it home with this. So I remember being at a banking meeting 2 years ago this spring, and there was an AI speaker, and she stood on stage, and when she asked the question, I was watching her speak, watching her presentation, and she, raise your hands if you're using any type of AI in either work or your personal life. And let's say there were 200 people in the room, and a spattering of hands went up. And then she asked the question, well, raise your hand if you have heard of these, but you're not ready to try it yet, or you're afraid of it, or there's a rule against it in your bank, and a whole bunch of hands went up. And then there was a third question, like if you've never even heard of AI or whatever, that we didn't pay attention to that group. But fast forward to, you and I just did this one in December, and we had 70 people on the meeting, and we asked the question, well, raise your hand if you're already using AI, either in work or in your personal life. That's the majority of hands, right? People are doing this today. And I think where we come in and where we can be helpful, and others like us, I think you've already hit on this, is to be more discerning about what tool to use. So if you're just using ChatGPT, or I hear a lot of folks say, oh, we're going to use Copilot because it's Microsoft, right? We can buy these Copilot licenses. We know our data is safe. What I don't hear anybody talking about, Jennifer, is actually building out a workflow, building out an automation, talking about an agentic process. They may know those words, but I've rarely talked to somebody who's actually built something that's made them more efficient. Are you seeing some of the same things?
Absolutely. And, most of where we live is, of course, going to be in that daily tasks, but where AI is really creating their return on investment and really making a shift and a difference in the organization is with the automations. And
you've got a large customer, I think, in Pennsylvania that's not in banking, but that's not really relevant here. And they're using a tool that we brought to them, and they've just blown this thing up, right? What are some of the things that they're doing from an automation and augmentation standpoint?
Yeah, so they're actually a bakery. And so there's a lot of logistical processes that they have created workflows around. So what, used to take humans, a whole team of humans, they're now able to add some AI to that and allow their people to be a little more faster and more efficient. They're using it for everything from HR to their business development teams using it for the things that they do every day. So they've really found use cases, not only those large use cases that we're talking about, but also many use cases within each department in the organization.
Yeah. Well, you and I participated in this 2 weeks ago, I think. We participated in the kickoff at a financial institution's AI team. And it's a different state. It's not Kentucky. Sorry, Kentucky bankers, but it's in Indiana, so they're close. I was really impressed with the way they went through this. And so they brought a team of people together. I think there's 50 people in this financial services institution. I think they had about 12 people on the call. Jennifer, you and I did this kickoff with them. We kind of walked them through, what's the expectation? We need leadership involvement. Here's the tool. Here's how the tool works. But more importantly, here's the training that's built into the tool. And so step one is we want everybody in this room to go through the training in the next 2 weeks, which I'm happy to say 2 weeks on, they've almost all completed it. And then we want everybody to meet back with these smaller groups and talk through what we call business use case ideation workshops. That's a big mouthful. But what do we do in these ideation workshops? Tell me what we would do when we bring a client in and take them through this exercise.
Absolutely. So, and this is touching on the adoption, and that's
right.
The other side of the equation that I think can be missed by a company once they decide that they want to deploy the AI. It is how are we going to actually roll this out to the organization? So, and ideation workshops are such a key critical part of that. And basically what it is you're going to want to identify cross-functional AI leadership team and ask them to use a tool for 30 to 60 days, get it in their hands, and come up with 2 to 3 high-impact use cases that they've discovered. And then you're going to want to get everybody in a room to share what those are.
Yes.
Because that is where the richness of ideas come. I mean, I know I use it every day, and so a lot of the things that I use it for that have made the biggest impact, I did not come up with.
No, I agree.
I work with.
Yeah, somebody else did it, and I'm like, oh, I think I could use that to do this other thing. I'll give you a specific example. I helped one of our folks build one yesterday, and I think I showed it to you this morning briefly. So it doesn't really matter what it is, but it is banking specific. So we have a bank that's publicly traded, and they have Sarbanes-Oxley controls that they have to go through, and they have to map these Sarbanes-Oxley controls to some other things and other control statements inside their bank. And so they've got this giant spreadsheet. I think there's 177 Sarbanes-Oxley control on the spreadsheet and all this data on the spreadsheet. And then you get this new document, and you've got 10 controls, and you've got to go look inside the spreadsheet and find which of these Sarbanes-Oxley controls map back to each of these 10 controls so you can answer this audit report. And it's not just a one-time exercise. You've got to do this repeatedly. And so when you ask these folks, well, how long does that take? And he said, the reality is it probably takes, anywhere from 30 minutes to over an hour per sheet, because some are 10 questions, some are 20 questions, some are 6 questions. And you've got to go fly through these Sarbanes-Oxley controls and figure out which ones apply. And he said, well, sometimes more than one applies, sometimes none apply, he said, so you really have to be a little bit of a domain expert to even know this. And so we said, well, I think we can build that in AI. And sure enough, we used the AI tool, and we didn't have to be programmers. I just told the tool what I needed the output to look like and what my input documents were going to be. And it asked me follow-up questions. It said, hey, give me the Sarbanes-Oxley list. And I gave it to it. 3 minutes later, it asked me follow-up questions about that list. And it gives me an analysis of it. Anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but at the end of the day, what we had was a repeatable workflow that anybody on this team now can load one of these questionnaires, and it will go map the answers, pulling the answers off the Sarbanes-Oxley document. And it does it all in just a couple of minutes. And then the expert sits down and goes through a completed document and verifies that the information is correct, instead of sitting there with a blank sheet going, oh my gosh, this is going to take me an hour. That's a real world example.
And that is probably something that would bubble up in an ideation workshop, because oftentimes your people, who are actually doing the work every day may not think of what they want to automate. However, if you automate it for them, come up and automate it for them, they will use it.
Yes, I found that to be true. I met with somebody Friday and he used a different word. We were talking about automation and he laughed at me and he said, well, he goes, you're probably not doing as much automation as you think. And I said, well, tell me why. And he said, well, automation means you don't have any human touching it.
Right.
He said, you're doing a lot of augmentation. And the more I thought about that, the more I really liked that term. We're really teaching our bankers to augment their experts inside their bank and give them better tools so they can be more efficient and more accurate at their job, right? We're not giving them tools and saying, hey, teach this machine how to do your job so you can not work here anymore.
Right, exactly.
We're saying, hey, here's a tool to make you better at your job. Absolutely. I love that.
And you have an analogy, which I think we've used a lot, several times, and I think it does a good job of describing how we look at AI. And there's a 10-mile journey. Like if you think of every task within the bank and what you do on a daily basis, it's a 10-mile journey. And, our expertise, our education, our experience, really where we're experts is that last 7 to 10 miles. However, we have to get through mile 1 through 7 of all the administrative tasks that we do every day in order to get the information collated, to get the documentation so that we can actually do mile 7 through 10. And so AI is that augmentation of miles 1 through 7. So you can take that off your plate and just focus on what you really enjoy and what is really making a big impact for the bank.
I love that. Yeah. So, and that's one of the things that, again, some of the bank presidents that I've talked to and other leaders, they're not saying, how do I leverage AI to cut jobs? Nobody's ever said that to me. And I don't think that's ever in the spirit of any of these conversations. However, I have heard and do believe it's the right question is, how do I leverage AI to not have to hire as many people as we scale the business? And I think that's a fair question and a fair use of the technology. And I think a realistic use of the technology is, how do I make people more efficient? So if I can do 10 of these in a day, typically, how can I make it so that person can do 20 of these in a day, or 40 of these in a day, or 50 of these in a day, or whatever this is in that example?
Yeah, and even touching on attracting talent into the bank. Inevitably, we've helped several banks go through this adoption process, and inevitably we'll find 1, 2, 3, 4 experts that might be in loan processing. They might be a teller, but they're complete whizzes at AI.
Yeah.
And so they're hidden throughout your organization because they've taken an interest in their personal life. And these people have an opportunity to rise up as leaders within the bank and help you deploy it. And then as you move forward. So as far as attracting talent, I think, taking those steps to be an AI-driven company.
That's a great point. As you were talking through that, I was actually picturing a couple of people at some of the banks I work with they're exactly what you're describing. You're like, oh my gosh, I never would have expected her or him to know this or have an interest in this. But all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, we've got a real expert here. Let's make sure we leverage that.
Absolutely. They're hidden throughout the bank. I can assure you.
One of the other things, Jennifer, that I think is really critically important, we talk about this a lot, is having leadership not just say, go forth and use AI, but having leadership actually leverage the tool itself. So you want to talk about that at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it truly does follow the org chart, and not just the C-suite, even the mid-level management. So this is an opportunity for them to really lead by example, because that is how it's going to be successful.
Yeah, great. That same bank in Indiana that I mentioned briefly a moment ago, when we did that kickoff, their CEO actually reached out to me separately the week before Christmas, so 3 weeks before the kickoff, and said, hey, I want to make sure that I am using this tool that I'm telling everybody else to use. So can you help me, Milton? Tell me how you use it. How can I be an effective CEO leveraging AI? And so I did, first smartest thing I could do. I went to AI and I asked AI, and I used a tool that knows me, has context about me and how I leverage it on a regular basis. And I just explained to it, I said, hey, I've got a CEO in a bank who's asking me how to leverage this tool or a tool in ways that can in some way mimic what I do. Can you help me write a document for this person that they can follow. And it did an amazing job. As you would imagine, it gave me this fantastic executive summary, basically the CEO's handbook on how to leverage AI inside of his organization. And I tweaked it a little bit and put a little flourish to it and gave it to him. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I needed. So I think getting him involved and knowing that the rest of that team, knowing that he was already using the tool and was excited about the tool, gave them license when they came into that room 2 weeks ago to really get excited about this because it's being pushed from the top of the org chart down. So with that, let me ask you one more question. If there's a bank president listening, Jennifer, today, thinking we need to do something, but I don't even know where to start, what's the one piece of advice you would give him or her?
I would say pull your AI leadership team together and just start. You just have to get started. Truly.
That makes perfect sense.
And so,
just stop waiting for somebody else to do it, right? That's exactly
pull
right.
your team together and take that first step.
Like, great information. Thank you, Milton. Thank you, Jennifer. What would you say is the single biggest barrier to driving business value from AI in the banking industry today?
Well, Jennifer hit on it earlier, Selina, but I would say the biggest barrier, frankly, is people are coming into this without a real plan. So they're saying, they think to put AI into my bank, I've got to go buy this tool, these tools. So they approve a budget, they get licenses for people, whether it's Copilot or whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's Hats AI or whatever it is. And then they assume that that's it, right? We've now given these people the tool, but they haven't gone through these steps. And these steps we would tell you are get everyone in the bank trained. Make sure every person in the bank is trained on this, even if they don't think they're going to use the tool, because there's going to be a new language and we want them to all speak the same language and not feel left out when they hear these words and phrases being bandied around. Secondly, is having that ideation. I'm going to learn how to say that word, this ideation use case workshop. And it doesn't have to be as fancy as a workshop, but getting the people from the different business units in a room and figuring out what are the most administrative heavy tasks that we do today that if we were able to augment or automate them in some way would make us more efficient, clear up a bottleneck or whatever that is, and then focus on one or two or three of those instead of just saying, hey, we got Copilot licenses for everybody and now we're an AI bank, right? That's probably what I would say, Selina, is the biggest challenge.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today and providing all this wonderful information that I know all of our KBA members need. And additional ImageQuest information is available on KBA's website at kybanks.com. Until next time, this podcast is a wrap. Have a great day, everyone.